Nobody expected a hospital full of doctors and nurses to be brought to silence by a puppy. But when a trembling little dog walked in with a black bag clutched in his teeth, everything stopped. What was inside left the staff in tears and changed lives forever. It was a busy morning at the city hospital. Nurses hurried down the hallways with clipboards in hand. Doctors rushed from room to room, and the lobby buzzed with patients waiting for their turn. Amid the routine chaos, no one expected something extraordinary to walk through the sliding glass doors that a tiny puppy, its fur dusty and paws trembling, staggered into the hospital. Heads turned instantly. At first, people thought it had wandered in by mistake, but then they noticed something unusual. Clenched tightly in the puppy's jaws was a small black bag, worn and dirty. Swaying with each shaky step, the little dog walked past the reception desk, ignoring gasps and whispers, and stopped in the middle of the lobby. He set the bag gently on the floor, then looked around at the startled staff. His eyes were wide, desperate, and pleading, as though he had come there for help. Nurses paused mid-step, patients leaned forward in their chairs, and even the security guard lowered his radio. The puppy whimpered softly, pawing at the black bag before nudging it closer to the nearest nurse. His tiny body shook, but his determination was clear. One nurse knelt down, her eyes filled with concern. "What's this, little one?" she whispered, reaching out a cautious hand. The puppy barked sharply, not out of aggression but urgency, then pushed the bag against her foot. He whined again, glancing from the bag to her face, as if begging her to understand. The nurse's hand trembled. Something inside the bag shifted, a faint rustling that made the puppy bark louder. The sound echoed through the room, pulling more staff into the growing circle of curiosity. The puppy scratched at the bag desperately, his claws scraping against the worn fabric. Then he sat back on his hind legs, eyes locked on the nurse, letting out the saddest cry anyone had ever heard. That it was as if he was pleading with every ounce of his tiny being. "Please, help them." The nurse froze, her hand hovering above the bag. A ripple of unease spread through the room. "It's moving," she whispered, glancing at the others. The puppy barked again, louder this time, his tail low but wagging nervously, urging her to act. Security stepped forward, wary. "Ma'am, be careful. We don't know what's inside." A doctor joined the circle, his brow furrowed with concern. The bag shifted once more, a faint sound rising from within, soft, fragile whimpers that silenced the entire lobby. Every pair of eyes locked on the small bundle. Some patients gasped, others leaned back in their chairs, hands covering their mouths. The air felt heavy, each second stretching into eternity. The puppy paced in circles, scratching at the floor, then returned to the bag, pressing his nose against it with a mournful whine. He lifted his head, staring straight into the doctor's eyes, as if pleading with him directly. The doctor knelt slowly, heart pounding. He reached for the zipper, his fingers trembling. Behind him, nurses held their breath. The puppy's cries grew frantic, echoing through the silent hall. Then, with one decisive pull, the doctor began to open the bag. The zipper slid open with a faint rasp, and the doctor carefully peeled back the edges of the worn black bag. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, all that could be heard was the pounding of hearts and the anxious whines of the puppy standing guard. Inside, huddled together in a fragile heap, were 3 tiny puppies, barely weeks old. Their ribs were visible beneath thin, patchy fur. They whimpered weakly, eyes half shut, too exhausted to move. One lifted its head for a moment before collapsing against its siblings. Gasps echoed through the lobby. A nurse covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Patients shifted forward in their chairs, stunned by the sight. These weren't just stray animals. They were abandoned, starving babies, brought here by their brave little brother. The doctor's throat tightened. "They're alive," he said softly, almost in disbelief. The puppy barked sharply, wagging his tail as if to confirm. He nosed the bag gently, urging the humans to act quickly. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. This puppy hadn't come for food or comfort. He had come carrying the weight of his family's survival, and the hospital staff knew they couldn't waste another second. The moment the doctor confirmed the puppies were alive, the lobby erupted into motion. Nurses rushed to grab blankets, warm towels, and 4 kits, while another ran to the cafeteria for bowls of milk. The whimpers from inside the bag grew weaker, and urgency crackled in the air like electricity. The little messenger pup barked frantically, circling the bag as though encouraging everyone to hurry. He nudged each of his siblings with his nose, whining softly, unwilling to leave their side. His tiny body trembled, but his spirit never wavered. One by one, the puppies were lifted from the bag and wrapped in warm cloths. Their frail chests rose and fell unevenly, but with every careful sip of milk pressed to their lips, faint sparks of life flickered within them. Nurses dabbed their fur dry, doctors checked their heartbeats, and volunteers gently rubbed their paws to keep the blood flowing. That a hospital meant for healing people had transformed into a sanctuary for helpless animals. And at the center of it all was one brave puppy, who had carried hope in a bag and placed it at human feet that by evening. The hospital lobby was filled not only with doctors and nurses, but also with townspeople who had heard the story. Volunteers carried bags of dog food, warm blankets, and medicine. Children clutched small toys, eager to give comfort to the fragile pups. The hospital, usually a place for human suffering, had become a beacon of compassion. Patients in wheelchairs asked to be wheeled closer, their eyes softening at the sight of the tiny creatures wrapped in cloths. One elderly man whispered, "I came here for healing, but today I feel healed just watching this." The brave little messenger pup stayed close, never letting his eyes leave his siblings. When someone approached too quickly, he barked protectively, reminding everyone that he was still their guardian. The staff smiled through tears, calling him the little hero with the black bag. Donations poured in. Local shelters offered space, while families lined up to foster. The once desperate cries of abandoned puppies had turned into a movement of kindness, uniting an entire community in a way no one had expected. It wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was hope made visible. Weeks passed, and the hospital courtyard became a place of joy. The once frail puppies now bounded across the grass, their playful yips echoing through the air. Their fur had grown soft and shiny, their once empty eyes now sparkling with life. Patients who once sat in silence now smiled as they watched the little ones tumble over each other in carefree games. And always, just a few steps away, was the brave messenger pup. He never strayed far, always keeping a watchful eye on his siblings. Nurses would laugh, calling him the little guardian, while children giggled and reached out to pet him. The old black bag that once carried desperation now sat in the lobby on display. A reminder of the day hope had walked through the hospital doors on 4 tiny paws. It had become more than a rescue. It had become a miracle of love. Months later, the story of the black bag puppy was still told across the town. For many, it wasn't just about the survival of a litter. It was about the reminder that love and loyalty can come from the smallest, most unexpected places. The hospital staff often spoke of that day as one of their most meaningful experiences. Doctors who had saved countless human lives admitted that nothing had moved them quite like saving those tiny pups. Patients who had witnessed the moment carried the memory home, retelling it to neighbors, friends, and family. The puppy who had carried the bag was now celebrated as a hero. His courage not only saved his siblings but also inspired a wave of kindness that stretched far beyond hospital walls. And to you watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us, heroes can come in the smallest forms.